Greetings once again, Orphanites, and welcome back to our filmmaking vlog here on the orphanmovie.com. As always, I am your host, and actually I'm sitting here doing a little bit of script work, which you don't need to see that page, so I'm just going to close this up. Welcome back once again. We got lots of news for you this time around, and we might run a little long, so we're probably going to break this into two parts, just so you know. The last couple of weeks we missed out, and so I guess this will make up for missing those 2 weeks. Anyways, first off, the big news we got is that we've done some work on the website. It's got a new look to it. So if you haven't checked it out, go look at it now. It's content's a little bit different, not a whole lot different, but the overall look is a whole lot better. Also, on the contacts page, we have a email sign up. Yes, it's not just the generic send an email to the website type thing. It's actually an email sign up. We're not going to be doing a regular newsletter necessarily, but we will be sending out email updates to those of you who want to hear from us. There'll be things like stuff that I missed or information that I intended to put in the vlog and just didn't get to because of time, other things like that. Also, for those of you who saw it last week, I put out a little bit of a social media blurb, and there was a picture that was sideways. I'm sorry, but it was like 2 in the morning whenever I posted it, so I didn't really know that it was like that. But for those of you who are wondering, I know some of you probably recognized it. The picture is of a smokestack in a town called Thurber. It's about 70 miles west of Texas. And why would I have been in Thurber, Texas Saturday night? Well, I'm glad you asked. Give you a little bit of background on Thurber. Back in the late 1800s, there was a large vein of coal found in that area. That's only known coal vein to actually be in the state of Texas. And as a result, they had to mine it, and that meant there was a boom town that grew up around it. Thurber was a company town by any definition of the word, and at its largest point it had a population of 10,000. There were miners from 18 different countries that lived there. They actually weren't paid in currency, they were paid in Thurber script because everything you needed in Thurber was right there in Thurber, and they paid them these little pieces of paper that were in various amounts, and when you needed to go buy something, that's what you used. It was no good outside of Thurber, and it was only good inside Thurber. So over time, they went into some other things at the town. There was a brick plant, there was a little bit of oil being drilled there, but in the 1920s, a large field of oil was found about 15 miles west of there, and that kind of spelled the end for Thurber because the railroads started noticing that it was easier and cheaper to drill for oil than it was to mine coal, and coal had been what was running the locomotives, and they started moving over to using oil to run them. As a result, Thurber started dying out, and in 50 years it went from a boom town to a ghost town, and a ghost town's what led me to be there Saturday night. One of the characters in the movie is named Adam Lang, and he actually is a big fan of ghost hunting shows that are on TV, and actually kind of took that a little bit from me to put into his character because I love watching them too. I've always wanted to go on a ghost hunt, and there's actually a group on Facebook called Haunted Texas Paranormal. I follow them, and they were going to be doing a ghost hunt in Thurber. Well, Thurber's a place I've known about pretty much my entire life. Whenever we'd be going to visit relatives, we'd go by there, and I always, when a little kid, hey, what is that? That picture that was sideways is a smokestack that's there. It's all that remains of the electrical power plant that was there. So I've always had an interest in Thurber, and I thought, well, if I can go there and do a little bit of digging around in the town and go ghost hunting, win-win for me. Anyways, we went out there, and what's left of Thurber now really is only just a handful of buildings. There's a building that was once the Mercantile that actually has a restaurant there now. The other buildings are abandoned. There's a couple of homes, and at its pinnacle, Thurber had a population of 10,000. It's now got a population of 5, and there's just not a whole lot there really. But what there is pretty interesting, I thought. There's on one side of Interstate 20, the north side is where the main part of the town was. That's where the brick smokestack is, the smokestack restaurant, all that stuff. There's also a excuse me, there's also a cemetery that's on about a 9-acre size piece of land a little bit further north. Then on the south side, there's actually a really nice museum that's been put there by Tarleton State University, which is in Stevensville, some 30 miles south. But also there's a historic park with a example of the miners' houses. There's a church that was actually there in town. There's a caboose from a train. And all of these ended up, with the exception of the museum, ended up being locations that we were going to be checking out. The first place we went to was the cemetery. The cemetery actually is kind of interesting in a way in that there are a lot of the tombstones there aren't in English. They're in the language of the person who was buried there. There was people from 18 different countries that worked as miners in the coal mines in Thurber. And a lot of them have been flattened because about 8 years ago, there was some moron that for whatever reason went to the cemetery with a bulldozer and proceeded to start flattening everything in sight. Now, those of you who are at all familiar with paranormal and that sort of thing, you always hear about stories of people going into a house and it's a beautiful house, but we want to change everything, and they start remodeling and it starts stirring up activity. Well, that's sort of the same sort of thing that happened in the cemetery there in Thurber. There was a group of about 30 of us, and we all dispersed on our own pretty much to do our own little thing. We each had our own little piece of equipment we were using. I actually had downloaded a app called Ghost Hunting Tools, I think. It's this here that's supposed to read EMF, which is electromagnetic field, which is electromagnetism in the air, and then this down here was supposed to be come up with words. The theory is that spirits are able to manipulate the electromagnetic fields in order to gain energy to, say, tap you on the shoulder or appear to you or speak to you or whatever. And this app was supposedly going to pick up the higher EMF fields where they were doing that sort of thing. And supposedly they could have manipulated the EMF in a way that this would pick up words that they were trying to say. Now, quite honestly, I'm really a skeptic about this kind of stuff. I mean, I like watching the shows, but there's a lot of it that's just like, oh, that's just cheap parlor tricks. Oh, that's just, you know, somebody saying such and such. So I really went into this with a bit of skepticism, but I also went with an open mind as well, because quite honestly, I realize there are things in this world that we just don't understand. So I'm open to the possibilities. Honestly, whenever we were going through the cemetery, there was a couple of things that happened with this app that I have that really kind of caught my attention. There was one area that I was going through, and there was a grave of a child who had died at about 2 years old that I was standing at. It was one of the headstones that was still standing, and I had been using my app trying to get something, and nothing was happening there. So I started walking. And I was about halfway between that headstone and another one, and the EMF on the phone app started going crazy. Whereas it had been pretty much flat, now it was going crazy. I mean, it was in the red, and so I stopped and I stood there for a little bit, and I started getting words. I got names like Jordan and Ashlyn. I got the word field, which I thought was interesting because essentially this cemetery was a big field. There was also the word wolf, which I couldn't quite understand because wolves don't naturally live in Texas. They don't naturally occur here. I don't think there are actually any in Texas. But later on, as I was talking to some of the other people, I found out that there was another person, one or two people actually, that had gotten the word wolf. I'd also gotten the name Robert, which there was a couple of other people that said they'd gotten Bob or Robert, and found out from one of the organizers that there was, in fact, they've been out there investigating for 8 years, and they have frequently gotten the name Robert or Bob. So supposedly there is somebody named Bob there that interacts with people. I was very curious about it. I thought it was odd. I wasn't convinced necessarily. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, especially with the apps for the phone. Who knows? It could be that it's linked into Google Maps, and you know, it sends the signal to the satellite. The satellite looks and says, "Well, it's not a road or it's not a town. I don't know where you're at. You're in a field." It might be something like that. I don't know. But later on, I was in another area, and I started getting something that disturbed me a little bit more. Actually, my name showed up on there, and I don't know why. I also got the name Jessica. There are some other words, but it was starting off to be an interesting night because of those things. But we're starting to run a little bit long here, so tell you what, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back with another episode, and we'll see you then. So if you have the time, check out the new website. Sign up for the emails. I don't know how frequently they're going to come, but there will be coming out every now and again. And they might just be random junk. I don't know. At any rate, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time here on the Orphan Movie Vlog at theorphanmovie.com.